fastest path to getting what you want is not to do more. It's about breaking the patterns that thrive on striving. So, striving as a way of making things happen is very much a part of the hyperachiever type of personality, right? So if you recognize yourself as someone who knows how to make things happen, you've always achieved a level of success in your life, in your corporate, whatever you've put your mind to, you've achieved, right? You put your mind to something, you know how to move mountains, you get shit done, right? And even when you discovered the law of attraction, the level of excitement you felt was probably off the charts. It's like, oh my God, I can create my own miracles now. And it's almost like that striver part of you starts doing the work of the law of attraction. But there comes a point when you hit a limitation on what that pattern can do for you. So it no longer operates as the rocket fuel, let's say, that got your business off the ground. There comes a point where you notice in your entrepreneurial journey, in your business growth journey, that you are hitting a ceiling on your results. That no matter how hard you work, no matter what strategy you apply, you keep hitting the same ceiling over and over, year in, year out. And if this is resonating with you, I want you to know it's not just you. What is happening is a stage of growth. It's a stage of the evolution in your expansion. And what you're being called to when things stop working is you're being called to up level. And that means dismantling the paradigm that says, in order to achieve great results, you've got to do more. You've got to work harder. Like, you can only achieve great success but through sacrifice, whether that's sacrificing time with your loved ones, sacrificing your health and your well-being, sacrificing your sanity. All of this leaves you feeling confused, feeling sort of having feelings of disillusionment and wondering, like, what is wrong with me? And I know what that's like. For years I was hitting up against the same income ceiling, getting so far in my business growth and then self-sabotaging and just getting deeper into debt. And there was one point where I actually ended up like throwing my arms in the air and applying for a job. And I got so far through the process, I was actually offered the job with First Direct Bank. I'd been through all the interview process, I'd gone through all the competency tests, and all that was left was for me to contact HR and confirm my hours. And I recall very vividly when I made that phone call, I just heard, it was completely unexpected what came out of my mouth, but what actually came out of my mouth was, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I've wasted your time. And I gave them backward and I hung up. And my thinking at the time, that after I'd sort of heard this voice come out of my mouth, not realizing that was what I was going to say, I was sincerely ringing to give my hours, to confirm my hours with the job. But my thinking process afterwards, I'm not going to give 40 hours of my week to some employer when, what if I gave that 40 hours a week to my business? So that's what I did. But that voice, that logic was still the high achiever striver. And it worked for a while. It was like I'd seen the consequence of not working really, really hard. And that was to go back to work, which back to corporate, which I just didn't want to do. And that kind of catapulted me back into the other extreme of striver hyperachiever. And as I said, it worked for a while. And this is the problem with our patterns, is they do give you little wins, little victories, so they stay active in your paradigm. You believe they work for you. So what does it mean to dismantle the paradigm? Well, first of all, you've got to identify the paradigm and its pattern, and really sort of hold yourself in compassion here, because your pattern has its origin in protection. So its origin is in protection. So let's take this example of the high achiever, the striver energy. That part of you learned to be fiercely independent, to learn not to be a burden, to get recognition and reward through accomplishment. You know, but if you think about what is driving those behaviors, well, it's the fear of not being enough, the fear of having to prove your worth through achievement and productivity. You know, that so it's very much a fear that is driving those behaviors. So dismantling the paradigms means identifying and raising awareness to the pattern, holding yourself in compassion as you do so. This is, there's no judgment in this has its origin, as I say, in protection. But then once you've kind of raised awareness to, okay, I have a pattern that is sabotaging my next level, it's stopping me from growing, it's causing me to hit a ceiling on my results, I'm hitting up against its limitation. The next stage is to then break down the pattern into its component parts. And the reason we do this is literally so that nothing can escape your conscious awareness. So it's like you're shining a light on this pattern so that it becomes exposed. You're exposing it for what it is. So what do I mean by breaking down into its component parts? Well, you've got four component parts to every pattern. So the first one, the most obvious, is that final manifestation, the result. So what is the result that you keep perpetuating? So it could be credit card debt. It could be a lack of clients. That's the result, a lack of clients. Drives you nuts. Why aren't I getting any clients? It could be feast and famine income. So the first component part you've got to identify specifically is what is the result that I keep getting. So that's one component part. So identify the result. Then when you look at that result, and actually another one that I was working on with a client yesterday was like just earning just enough. Like never any surplus, never any abundance, only ever earning just enough. So that's a result, okay? So you highlight the result, you extract it and identify it. The next component is when you look at that result, what are the thoughts, the narrative, the story that is on repeat when you look at those results? So you look at your result, lack of clients, income ceiling, feast or famine, debt, whatever it is. The thoughts might sound like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get this right? I need to do more. People don't like me. People don't value my work. Maybe my messaging is wrong. I don't have a big enough audience. I'm shit at marketing. I hate sales. I must have a block. So you just literally like write it all down. What are the thoughts, the thought component part of this pattern? So then, so that you've got your result, you've got the thoughts that you think as you look at those results. The third component is, okay, so now I know that I've identified and kind of extracted out of my head and put onto paper all the thoughts associated with this pattern. When I think those thoughts and when I look at that result, what are the emotions that they evoke? What are the feelings that really get activated and triggered inside of me? So you might then highlight, God, it makes me feel frustrated and angry, that like, why aren't I further on by now? You might feel shame when you look at your results and have those thoughts. You might feel disempowered. If you think, what's wrong with me? I must be shit at marketing and sales. So it makes you feel small and disempowered. You might feel guilty because you're not doing enough, or you might feel overwhelmed because you don't know what to focus on or what you should be doing. So you again highlight as almost like you're shining a light on I always do that when I say shining a light, because it's like I'm holding a flashlight, a torch. But what is the emotional component of this pattern? So again, get it all down on paper, write it out. And then the fourth component part of this pattern is, as a result of those thoughts and those emotions that get activated, what is your default pattern of behavior? So you extract and get very specific. What do you do when you think those thoughts and have those feelings? What is your default action that you take? Could be hiding under the duvet. It could be, sinking into the barrel of biscuits and watching Netflix by way of distraction. Could be that you end up doom scrolling or procrastinating or putting the washing in and doing other stuff around the house, anything to distract yourself. You may be one who says, right, no, I go out for a walk, I clear my head, I listen to spiritual YouTube audios or whatever. Um, so that might be your default behavior when you're in this pattern. Could be that you don't go into freeze or procrastination or any of that. You might be one whose pattern involves a behavior of kicking on. Like you go all out. You're like, right, I've had enough of this. And you get your whiteboard paper out, flip chart out, and you start writing out a plan. This is what I'm going to do. Or you create a new offer, a sales page, and you get it out there. So it might be that you kick on into really like some kind of hyperdrive activity and you take massive action. So either way, whether it's like the freeze, procrastination, distraction, or you go into hyperdrive, whatever your behavioral response, just notice and see how what it's actually doing. That behavior is a way to self-soothe, to distract you from feeling those uncomfortable emotions. That's all it is. It's a balm. It's a self-soothing mechanism. And that's why it doesn't work. Because ultimately, it may give you a temporary bit of relief. You may get a temporary result, but if you're the kick-on type who does all this, stuff, you just get some temporary relief, some temporary resolution in the moment, but it will never permanently shift your results. So get very specific on your behavioral patterns. So as you can see your behavioral reactions. So as you can see, by identifying the pattern, the result, the thinking, the feeling, the behavior, you're shining a light of consciousness on the pattern. Okay. So once you've done that, a lot of the work that is out there teaches you, and I used to teach this. And a lot of the work out there tells you where your power is in changing the thinking. So start at the point of the thought process. If you change your thoughts, you have a different set of emotions. Those different set of emotions create a different level of action taking, right? And I always used to teach that, go in at the thoughts. What new thoughts can you think in response to that result? So that was it works. It's very, very powerful, but it isn't where the most profound change happens. It isn't where the magic happens. It gives you again another little temporary boost, but what that requires is a level of willpower to continuously practice changing the story. Because that it's like you're shoving out one level of story and trying to insert a new story over the emotion. And so that requires a lot of willpower. And it's how change happens over time, right? But it's exhausting. But where, as I said, the real magic happens is to go straight to the emotion. This is where you're ripping out the emotion at the root, because the emotion is what is driving all of this. The emotion is a historic trapped energy, an unprocessed trauma or a wound or a negative experience that got trapped inside of your body. And that energy is seeking to be released. And until it's released, it will continue to manifest itself in your experience. So, how do you release it? You release it by giving it full permission to be felt in your body, to be fully experienced. And this is the most profound work I do with my clients now. And it's the work that helped me heal my 23-year debt pattern in 6 months, cleared £50,000 of debt in 6 months after 23 years of trying every strategy known to man. So when you allow yourself to fully feel an old stuck emotion, Eckhart Tolle calls them pain bodies, that stuck energy dissipates. And that old stuck emotion, that energy, is a low frequency. So when you're harboring that low frequency in your body, you attract low frequency thoughts, you attract low frequency actions, you make low frequency decisions from that place, and you keep perpetuating a low frequency result. So when that emotion is pulled out of the core, fully felt, so it dissipates, it's like your cork bobs back up to the surface, meaning your frequency naturally raises. So the stories attached to the emotion gets discharged with the emotion. So you have this level of peace of mind. Like it goes so quiet in there because all of that narrative is linked to the emotion. And so suddenly you're like this beam of light. So you, from that place of light, you receive inspiration from the field. You start opening yourself up to receive new ideas, new inspired downloads. You start to see opportunities that were always there, but you couldn't see them before because of the paradigm you were operating from. So it is a 180 shift in consciousness. That's the paradigm shift. And this is where you start to call in the right clients, the money starts coming in, the abundance starts flowing again, because your energy is not caught up in resistance. It takes so much energy to suppress an emotion. It really does. So you free up all of that energy. So this is the work I do with my clients. This is the absolute sort of profound level of work. And so if you want help to break through in an outdated paradigm, a protective paradigm, then please click on the link below. You can book a call with me. Let's have a chat about how I can support you. But in the meantime, I hope you found this helpful. As always, please comment below if this resonates with you. Maybe even share a story of, if you've had an experience where you've shifted an energy, you've released some energy, and what were you able to manifest as a result? As always, I'd love to hear from you. So thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you in the next video.